Estate planning and legacy building ensure your wishes endure, crafting a future that reflects your values. Essential elements include creating wills and establishing trusts, guiding asset distribution, and honoring your life's impact. Understanding assets is paramount, enabling intentional decisions for their future handling. It's not just about wealth. It's about the continuation of your legacy through careful planning and clear directives. Family dynamics are integral. Addressing these relationships with clarity prevents disputes and preserves harmony. In addition, minimizing taxes and understanding legal nuances safeguard your estate's value, maximizing the inheritance for your heirs. Philanthropy can also play a significant role in your legacy, allowing your values to extend beyond your lifetime through thoughtful giving and charitable endeavors. Regularly updating your estate plan in response to life's inevitable changes ensures its ongoing relevance and effectiveness. By doing so, you secure not just your assets, but a piece of the future that continues to reflect your wishes and values. Jamie, with your lawyer hat on, I'm curious, what are important principles that people need to pay attention to when it comes to effective estate planning? And what are common mistakes that people make?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'll start with one I think that's a little bit more relevant since we're live streaming right now. I'll talk about digital assets. That's probably the one that when I look around as the most common mistake when it comes to estate planning today. And the second most common one is just not having a plan in place. You have the majority of the country really that does not have an up-to-date estate plan in place. And, estate planning is more than just the dollar amounts, the more than your will, your trust, powers of attorney, healthcare, decisions too. I mean, it's down to the values that you want to instill in your kids and loved ones. But digital assets are the biggest mistake. Those rules have really only been in place in most states for the better part of the last, 7 to 3 years. So it's probably one of the fastest things whenever I talk to an attorney, a financial advisor, a client, that I can pinpoint your stuff is not up to date. Because I ask people, well, when is the last time you updated your trust or your will? And somebody says 8 years ago. I look up their state and I know that the rules didn't exist before then. So you have to update it. And the interesting part of how those rules came up, I'll give an example. So you have this podcast, it probably kicks into an email. We're using StreamYard, has a login. The videos are being stored in there. When you click through originally and set these things up, you went through some term of service agreement. We call TOSAs, that long agreement you scroll to the bottom of as fast as humanly possible and say, I agree to everything. And what you mostly agree and all those everything, digital, it essentially says you don't own the assets. That's the short answer. And I'm overly simplifying that, but 90% of the time it says you have a lifetime lease to this digital property. If you are to die, you can't leave it to anybody. And so the mistake that a lot of people make with business assets and other things out there today is they actually set all this stuff up personally, that when you logged into your email originally for Gmail, that might be where all your business stuff goes, but you set that up under a personal name. So when you die, that's attached to you. It wasn't set up in the business. You can't pass that to anybody else. That's a contractual agreement. It doesn't matter what the state does. It doesn't matter what your will says. Doesn't matter what your trust says. That's a contractual agreement you agreed to outside of those. What your wills, your trust documents can say now is that you can give a fiduciary access to these types of digital assets for the purpose of wrapping them up. So essentially to pull maybe copyrighted information out, to shut down accounts, to delete things, to download stuff that you might have a right to. But that's a huge mistake going on out there today. So I head up the wealth and trust team at a company called Bryn Mawr Trust. We're 125-year trust company, and we do this a lot for financial advisory firms. So we come in as corporate trustee, and we do it for individuals too. But that's a huge mistake out there, almost across the board, because it's so new. And if you think about who's still in mass dying today, it's people in their 80s and 90s. They don't have as many digital assets as the next 10 years of people who will be passing away have. And so you're going to see more issues with this than like just haven't had that many cases around it. There are cases, but there will be substantial ones over the next 10 to 20 years where people own podcasts, blogs that are generating tons of revenue that all of a sudden you find out you can't leave to anybody. And, some other company is now picking that up. And so that's a scary proposition.
That is really interesting. Thanks for sharing that. I'm wondering if Connie, as a grandmapreneur, how do you view the role of estate planning and entrepreneurship in shaping your legacy?
Well, I think that I'm different from most normal people about that because my kids want me to save up for retirement, and I say I am retired. What can I want to spend it. So when you have a business, I have 2 businesses going on now. And when you have a business, sometimes you have to invest, like to have people help you. And so my son hates that I spend money on my business, but I'm spending it on my business, first of all, because I don't have a lot of time. I don't have like 40 years. Well, maybe, but I'm pretty sure I don't. But I think that by investing in myself and my business, I have the chance to leave much more to my survivors than I would if I didn't, So I'm actually trying to make a big, I'm making a big investment on my new business. And my kids would prefer that I didn't spend any money and just save it. And, I have to tell all retirees, you ought to think like me. Like we deserve it. We don't have to save it up for everyone else. I'm having the time of my life running businesses. So I'm spending it on my businesses. I'd rather spend it on my businesses than have a Mercedes.
I think that you might be ahead of your time because in the Fidelity study that I referenced in the introduction, that's what they're talking about as a trend today, that it's more likely that people are defining retirement not as stopping working completely, but perhaps starting a business and doing things that they care about.
Exactly. I couldn't do it before because I, as a college professor, I'm sure you all know going to college, you pull all-nighters to do your reports and to study for exams. Well, I was pulling all-nighters for 40 years. I would stay up and grade papers. And so now I get to do what I want to do. I wake up just like your uncle. I wake up early every morning excited about what I'm going to do next.
Unfortunately, I did my share of all-nighters. I did not break up my work trying to write 2 pages per day for 2 weeks. I waited until the night before, and then the real motivation kicked in.
Yeah, I used to do once a week. I would pull 2 all-nighters to grade all of the students' papers. Yeah.
Ross, in the context of cognitive aging, is the key to address estate planning early before potential cognitive challenges begin?
Well, absolutely. I think the decline in cognitive acuity is a big factor in just how one ends up aging, the satisfaction with their own aging, and this can really affect family relationships. So yeah, early planning is very important. Jamie's talking about pre-planning for some of those new challenges, including these digital assets. I mean, if you start losing your reasoning ability, your executive functioning, speed of processing, it becomes much more difficult to actually navigate this. So early planning sounds like really a good idea. The video also, so that's one aspect here. I actually wanted to comment on the video itself, if that's okay.
Sure.
And in terms of altruism, distributing funds, it's a really important psychological aspect of aging. When people, as they age, if they feel like they can actually contribute in different ways, they end up being much more satisfied with their lives. And it's particularly noticeable, in that middle age to and the transition to older adulthood, just around the time when people retire. If you don't have that aspect of your life where you're really, where you feel like you can be altruistic, you're distributing your resources in a certain way, you're contributing more than just to your own immediate family, but to society at large. Then once you actually get into old age, you it's just a different feeling. It's Erickson was a researcher way back when, developed these stages that are really rough, but he talks about this generativity versus stagnation, that you can't really enjoy old age unless you have that phase in your life where you are altruistic.
Jamie, I see you nodding. Did you want to weigh in either the cognitive decline in planning or the altruism?
Well, yeah, I've got maybe three quick things. I'll try not to drag on for too long, but yeah, the one, I mean, look, the cognitive decline part too, just legally, if you start declining, that can be a challenge point for the documents you create at that point. So, like, just from a legal standpoint, like, you absolutely want to do it earlier, not later, just from even the validity of the documents. It also represents like a risk, which you see today, right? Digital theft and fraud is the highest it's ever been, and it's going to get worse and worse. That one's not on a decline. The next 5 years of our lives, that's going to become a scarier and scarier proposition. And so some of this pre-planning, right, giving fiduciaries access, ensuring the, dual authentication, all of that digital protection mechanisms, I think is super important. And yeah, the altruistic part's really interesting because I presented on something else earlier today, and there's actually 18% of retirees say they're unwilling to cut back any charitable gifts from their spending. So there's a very core group that says like this is an essential expense for retirement. Because if you really look at from like a number standpoint, you go to a financial advisor, right? Like absolutely you can cut your charitable gifts. But it's really interesting that 18% of the population says they're unwilling to cut that at all. And it kind of goes to that point. Like it's so tied to meaning and kind of moving up that, hierarchy of needs to that, financial freedom, altruistic, finding your aspiration level. And if you don't have that, you kind of can't. And I do agree with that. You can't get to that maybe last stage of enlightenment without it.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's more than just looking at the balance sheet and saying cut expenses. There is a meaning and purpose there. So it can be significant. Let's move to segment 3.